I have, after 3 years working, we've just finally released the DVD. It's a double DVD package. It's actually 2 discs of 2 hours each. It's a 4-hour information disc, educational disc on what we're getting at right now. I have included in there live footage and photographs of the underground facilities, the drills, the locations, and everything I'm going to talk about tonight is completely documented in the visual DVDs that are available. So if you want to know what's going to happen, and I'm getting around to the point of what we are actually talking about here, when you want to know all of it and understand what's taking place, get this DVD. It'll completely set you back on your heels. So now let me get back to subject matter. We've got all these underground facilities and these giant drills. The Chinese one I was talking about, I want to finish that. The Chinese, they have a drill that is actually 3 drills across, face the front end. If you're facing them, they're like huge circular drills. The one on the left and the one on the right are big enough for an 18-wheeler to drive into the hole that one of them would make. They have one drill that is one of those huge drills on each side, and then in the middle is one larger drill that if you were inclined to do so, you could stack an 18-wheeler on top of another 18-wheeler and drive in through that thing. So you have 3 across the face of the drills that they've been using in China. I do have photographs of inside the Chinese tunnels. I have the information and pictures on the ones in Russia, and we have, of course, the complete, actually live footage of inside the tunnels and the underground hideouts in the United States. Some of these are created where they are primarily going to grow greens and foodstuffs underground. Complete setup, greenhouse configurations underground to be able to continue fresh vegetables and animals and fish underground in these specialized growing facilities. And again, they're all interconnected by highways big enough to have drag races on them. And they're mind-boggling. I do have a couple of these photos that I'm talking about are on my website. You actually can go look up the website and then look where it says photographs and a photo gallery, I think is what it says. And we have several photographs, wonderful pictures of down inside these facilities that have been totally filled with freeze-dried survival foods. Now, I'm still, when I was investigating this, I was still in a quandary. What in the world on earth would it be to cause these people, number one, to stop stealing as much as they were for their own pockets and start putting all this money into these rat holes underground, these survival facilities, which includes, by the way, one that recently had been completed under the Capitol building that will hold 3,000 people. And they've expanded underground facilities at the White House. In other words, entire facilities for living that weren't there before that are now under the White House. Not that the president's ever going to be there, because more than likely he's going to be long gone before this stuff hits the fan in one of the bigger, better facilities. They had taken the NORAD facility, which is the one that's inside the Granite Mountain for 40 years. It's been there, that was always there and doing all the NORAD warning facilities for the possibility of an invasion, a nuclear invasion, from either Russia or China, and they're worried about it for so many years about that, and they had built this huge underground NORAD facility. And by the way, some of these are like 20 stories down. 20 stories down into the ground. We're not talking about a one level, it's like really hard to comprehend. But the NORAD facility, a little while, was taken apart. They took all the high-level electronic tracking devices and equipment and moved it into another air base several miles away. I think it's called the Peterson Air Base, just off the top of my head. All of this, again, is in the DVDs that I'm talking about. Everything we're talking about is covered in the DVD. By the way, it's called Nibiru. The Incoming of Nibiru is what the title of the DVD is. Because what
Yeah,
I finally...
I was seeing that on your website.
Yes. Excuse me?
I was seeing that on your website. Order the new incoming Nibiru DVD from the store.
Right, and that's the one that literally is 4 hours. It's rather tedious, and believe it or not, we had cut it down like an hour and a half, and I hated to do it. I had to take so much out, but the bottom line is everything will be explained very thoroughly and completely in this DVD. We try to answer every possible question that would come up. Now, let me get back on track. Here's where, so I'm sitting here and I'm saying, well, what would it be that would scare the leaders of all these nations so badly that they actually would be building facilities for themselves with our money, of course, being kept completely secret for the most part, and people kept completely away. You can't go to these. And by the way, I do have a list of the locations of most of the facilities on my website where they are in America. But what is it that would ever scare all the leaders of the world to go about creating and spending this money for 20 years? And somebody came to me at a high level and simply said, you know, it's probably Planet X, Nibiru. And you know, and I said, oh, I had heard about that. You know, everybody had heard a little bit about that thing, and it's one of those things where automatically when somebody says, you know, it's called Planet X because it's that's Roman numeral 10. Actually, it doesn't mean X like in mysterious. It actually means Roman numeral 10 for the 10th planet, and that it's on this huge elongated orbit going way out past Pluto and then coming back in, and that it's like a 3,000-year orbit, an elliptical orbit, and it will be coming back through. Well, again, I like everybody else. You know, I didn't even want to hear it because I thought, oh, this is one of these things that when somebody says it, you expect somebody else, or in the background you want to listen to, you know, you wanted to hear the spooky music to play background when somebody starts talking about quote-unquote Planet X coming back. But the bottom line was this. I asked a couple people, I said, is there any possibility to it? Is there a truth to this thing? Who's studying this? Where can I find out about this thing? I mean, if this is, and that, because then it did make sense. If, in fact, there was something like a huge, catastrophic, intergalactic kind of a situation on its way in, that did make sense, as crazy as it sounds when you first hear it, but it only sounds crazy if you don't know anything about it. So I spent about 9 months contacting, getting with everybody that ever had written a paper on this thing to find out if it was real, astronomers, and all the stories connected with it. And I found out about a fellow named Sitchin, who back in the 60s had said that he had deciphered 2,000 clay tablets from the nation of Sumeria many years ago. In the 60s, the clay tablets were 4,000 years old, and once they deciphered them, it tells a story in great depth of this Planet X, Nibiru, coming back around every 3,600 years, and that was what caused Noah's floods, and that was what caused all these biblical descriptions of the stars falling from the sky and killing 100,000 soldiers back during the time of the Israelis, and all of the biblical references to a thing called wormwood, which is this giant planet that would return every once in a while to destroy and clean off the face of the earth. And so I'll summarize it by saying this. After contacting the people, getting all of the information I could from every possible direction, astronomical, scientific, biblical scholars, etc., I came to the conclusion that there is no question that Nibiru, Planet X, is on its way back in, that Ronald Reagan discovered it, was given the information by his people, and George Bush, approximately 1983. That was when everything started changing. That was when they finalized all these, started finalizing and completing these tunnels. And that's what it is all about. All the money has gone into constructing these survival facilities and filling the facilities with foodstuffs to maintain the elite, limited few that are going to have tickets to get down underground when the stuff is about ready to hit the fan. And when Nibiru comes back around, and by the way, here's the problem. There's nobody in the world yet since I've been talking about this, and now for about 60, 90 days since we've released the DVD, we've not had a single person that can answer the question, why are they building the underground facilities, and why have they filled them with foodstuffs so that they were ready as of last month, as of the beginning of this year. The foodstuffs in the facilities are like 98% done. Why are they putting the foods in today because a lot of people say, oh, it might be 50, 100 years. No, it's not. It's on its way back in. They would not fill it with the foods. They would not be stealing all the gold and stealing all the money and putting it into these underground facilities so that if it happened next week, that they would be able to get underground, okay? And it would be filled. It is already filled. All of them are ready for use. Tonight, as I am speaking, all these facilities are ready. And if there's anybody that can come up with a different reason, I want to know about it. Because here's what's happened. I contacted two major groups, so to speak, that have been doing the following the Planet X thing long before I even knew it existed, I got to tell you. They've been following this thing for long, like 30 years, 20 years. They agree. They disagree on a couple of things, but they agree that it will be coming back probably in less than 5 years. It may be coming back as early as being first seen next December, this coming December.
That's exactly what I heard. An inside source told me that it's likely going to happen at the end of this year.
Yes, here's the and now again there are a couple of disagreements in terms of a lot of little technicalities, and which all make sense, and they all are very intelligently logical and potentially proper. The consensus is the earliest time would be that it would be visually seen in December as a new star in the sky, out there someplace, wherever, and coming and getting bigger every week. And that it would pass, that's, again, now I'm talking December, January, February, March, and that it would be coming closest to causing the problems to Earth in March and April. All right, so it would be seen in December. It would be coming in, and then what's going to happen, it will, and by the way, this planet is been calculated to be 5 times the size of Earth. So it's pretty big.
3 times.
No, it's physically, well, of course, actually nobody knows. I wouldn't argue. What I'm saying is that the bulk of the guys doing, the astronomers that have done the physical reaction that it has caused, outlying planets, etc., things of that sort, they can calculate mass and blah, blah, blah. Okay, but also, going by the descriptions, the description of the size of it that has been documented in every single historic scripture that goes back a couple of thousand years. It's in the Bible. It's in all the Oriental astronomers actually wrote and tracked it coming around back in the year 10,057. And they kept track of it. They logged it in. The monks on the mountainside in Tibet logged it in. All of these people that have, and the Sumerian clay tablets, all right? And then there's another fantastic piece that I won't get into too much that I do explain in the DVD, but there was a bronze plate that's called the Sky Disk that was located in Germany. In Germany, it is dated to the year 3,600 years ago. 3,600 years ago, they did this disc, and it's the equivalent of, it's about 12 inches across. It's made of bronze and highlighted in gold, laminated in gold. And it shows the solar eclipse, and it's completely dated because it shows the locations of constellations and stars which in today's computerized astronomy, you can take those stars, feed them into the new computer programs, and it will tell you the exact day to the day that this thing was created. And what it is actually a picture, if you will. You would call it, if it was done with paints, it would be a painting. It is a plaque, a disc plaque, 12 inches across, that has a picture of the sun, the moon, star constellations and their locations, and the fact that it's a solar eclipse taking place. But you can see both the sun and the moon, so they know that it was not the moon doing the eclipse, and it is Nibiru. But the big deal is the exact date of this thing was 3,600 years ago when it was created. It was discovered at an ancient site similar to Stonehenge.
I think I saw this before.
Only it was in Germany, and they had this disc, etc. And I go into all that, and I show it, and I have pictures of it, and all the rest of that business at the museum, and da-da-da-da-da. All of that is also in the, it's one of the reasons that the DVD set is 4 hours. It's because I wanted to cover everything that's connected, and I start out with the money and come right on up to the day that this is expected to be coming back. So the people that have been studying it from an astronomical science view have decided, and first off, again, we get back to size, calculated it to be, okay, well, I'm going to really put it this way, that it's either 3 to 5 times size, but the feeling is it's probably as big as 5 times the size of Earth. It also has like 4 moons of its own. It's like a secondary system with 4 moons traveling with it and coming back together as a group. Now, the devastating part of this thing is a combination of things. There will not be a collision of it hitting Earth. That's not going to happen, period. I mean, it might, but that's not the feeling. But it will cause an eclipse of the sun at one point in time, at least. When it comes in, it will come in and go around the sun, the same as a typical comet will do. Halley's Comet comes in 75 years, every 75 years, goes around the sun, goes back out, and he doesn't come back for 75 years. There was a comet that was discovered a few years ago, was called the Hale-Bopp Comet. It came close by, passed behind the sun in 1997, if I'm not mistaken, and it came 97, went around, and went back out. Now that one, and this is important, that one is on a 4,200-year orbit. And the reason I say it's important was when I first heard that the Nibiru would be possibly a 3,000-year comet, or a 3,000-year orbit, not being tremendously schooled in astronomy at that time, I thought, that's kind of goofy. You're trying to tell me this thing goes out, 1,850 years, and then comes back 1,850 years, to constitute a 3,000-year orbit. I said, that sounds stupid. But when I found out that the Hale-Bopp is on a longer one of 4,200 years, well, then I was wrong. That's not stupid, because it's a reality in terms of the traveling of a comet. Now, this thing is not a comet. I have to reiterate this. So its tail, and this thing will have a tremendous tail dragging behind it, of space junk, meteorites, and big pieces of rock and what have you being dragged along behind this thing. Believe it or not, Halley's Comet, the tail is 24 million miles long. Now, the Nibiru tail, which again is not going to be frozen ices and pieces of dirt, it's going to be meteors and meteorites, if you will. When it comes in, passes around the sun, then the Earth on its regular orbit will pass through the tail 2 times. So we will be bombarded with asteroids and things of that sort, pretty good-sized stuff, 2 different times. The first time when it goes around behind the sun, and then we will pass through the tail. And then we will continue going around. It will pass and most likely go back out again, and when it goes back out, we will go one more time on our regular orbit through the tail, actually a second time. And we'll take, according to the mathematics and the size and the angularity of this thing passing through the tail, it will probably take about 1 hour for the Earth to go through which is going to be a meteor storm like nobody's seen since the time of the Bible.
No, I remember studying up on what Nancy Leader had to say from Zeta Talk, and she claimed that the Planet X is made out of mainly iron, and that the tail is made out of mainly iron dust, and it's red, and when it passes us, it's going to get the whole planet like dusty, of course with the meteors and everything, but it's going to turn all the water red.
And I pretty much agree with all of that. That I believe that to be totally true. It's always been depicted in all of the graphics, And by the way, you'd include stuff on the walls of cave walls, for crying out loud, on this thing. But the Chinese have pictured it, and again, the Chinese astronomers that did this back in the year 1050 or whatever it was, when the Chinese astronomers did their work for the emperor. If they screwed up or they did something that was considered to be an error, they cut their heads off.
Yeah.
They just cut their heads off. So you're not talking about this isn't a hoax that somebody made and came up with 3,000 years ago. In case those of us have to realize, these people weren't screwing around with putting together crazy hoaxes back in the year 2000. But so. In terms of coloration, it has been depicted for many years in many, many scriptures, like I say, from the hillsides of the Tibetan mountains by the monks 1,000, 2,000 years ago or whatever.
I've read about that, yeah.
They've all depicted it with a red tail glowing off on two sides. I would completely agree the likelihood of it being iron ore blowing off of this thing as it travels, through space, that would make it look like it had two red wings coming off of it, and that's very likely. And again, there also is, of course, talking about in the Bible, when this thing comes back around, it describes the eclipse of the sun, etc., and it talks about the waters turning red. And if we go through what literally would be a rain shower of organic, actually iron ore dust, which is orange, that basically is probably exactly true in terms of the water would all be covered, although it could be other things on the water. Now, here's what we're looking at. People say, how is it going to affect, and also it's two important points. One is people want to know, when will we feel the effect of it? All right. If you watched the news last night, you saw one of the effects of it. The weather for the last 2 to 4 years on the globe has been the most bizarre weather in 1,000 years. All right, in terms of drought, rain, floods, earthquakes. This is a great one that nobody's paid attention to. Going back a couple of years ago, it started up, but there are like 35 to 40 volcanoes erupting today in the globe. All right, now they're not making the news. Well, they do every once in a while. You actually see ABC and NBC saying, the big one is blowing up in Iceland. They just had another one back in Japan, and they had another one in in India. But if you went in and just looked at the geological reports, you'll see that they have as many as 30 to 40 volcanoes presently erupting. They're marked as an erupting volcano. All right, that's something brand new. At Yellowstone National Park, last month, they always have a lot of small earth movement at Yellowstone. But last month they had, I don't remember what it was like 200 or more individual, what they call swarms of earthquakes at Yellowstone. They also, in June and August this last year, the underground became so hot at Yellowstone, they had to block off about 3 or 4 miles of the regular roadways because they had been turned into maple syrup from the heat underground at the Yellowstone Park.
Right.
All right.
I remember hearing about that too. You know, I'm actually from Wyoming as well.
And additionally, and I'm not too far. I'm in Idaho. If it goes, I'm out of here. I'll tell you that much. Anyhow.
Actually, on a positive note, I remember reading that Nancy
let me put it this way. I'm positive.
Yellowstone's not going to erupt.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't take a $10 bet on that one. But here's the point. It's already also affecting every planet. In the last 2 years, every planet in our solar system, starting out by Pluto and coming back in, has started to change its temperatures. They're all going up. Their surface gases and dust storms on all of the planets are varied and are changing and altering, and there are dust storms taking place that never took place in going back 1,000 years. All of the planets are being affected by something already. Some of them are jiggling and moving and being affected in their orbits, where they're coming around and going maybe a little farther out and then coming back or whatever. Slight variations. All right.
Man-made global warming.
Right, for sure. And by the way, talking about the global warming, okay, this was officially declared as the hottest year in the history of the globe this last year. All right? That's a reality. The bottom line is also glaciers. I did a serious study on the glaciers. So because I got aimed by a variety of scientists over the last 2 years while I've been studying this thing, when I would read papers, et cetera, and I would be turned to, go to this, look at this reference, do this reference. And I studied an entire, I think it was like a 2-hour program done originally by a photographer, and then he brought in scientists because he realized what he was photographing, and that was that the ice caps and these glaciers are melting from underneath. The water literally the melting is taking place from underneath and coming out. Obviously, all the water that comes from the glaciers, et cetera, all of that eventually goes into the ocean. And in case you were not aware of, and I bet you weren't, as we speak today in Miami Beach, about 7 months ago, maybe a year ago, but they finally had to spend millions of dollars in Miami Beach installing water pumps because the water has raised, the elevation of the surf at Miami Beach has been brought up so high, all primarily to glacier ice melts, that during the high tide in Miami Beach, every single day when they have high tide, it is flooding 5 to 6 blocks into the city of Miami Beach. And they have had to, excuse me, let me get a drink here quickly. Hold on a moment.
Okay.
They literally have had to put millions of dollars of pumps to salvage the city of Miami Beach from the store, so that the storefronts wouldn't all be destroyed.
Sounds like it's become like Indonesia.
It's the point is the water has come up that high. People say, oh well, I don't think. Well, and how much is it going to take before that melts, and how long will it? Oh, that'd be 10 years, and at this rate and all that rate and everything. No, baloney, folks. It's done as we speak. While I am talking now, the water is so high at Miami Beach that they have to put pumps in for the high tide every day today. Now, they've been in there for at least 6 months, maybe even 8 or 9 months now, pumping the water. They just automatically switch on at high tide and try to keep it out.
To be honest, that's the last of the problems that people in Florida are going to have to worry about. If you're in Florida, it's not the best place you want to be, or New Jersey, or the West Coast.
Well, yeah, Florida. No, Florida is even worse. See, I lived there. I lived in half of my life in Florida, and my son and one of my boys is there, works there, has been there for. Matter of fact, you'll get a kick out of this. He manages the biggest recording studio in the United States in Florida, and been there for 30 years. I used to be in the music business. I was the promotion director for the southeast part of the United States for MCA Records. I introduced I introduced Elton John to the United States, and
Wow.
been on the road with the Who, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, it's before the government decided to mess around with me. Okay, so much for that. The planet itself, when it comes close enough, it already is affecting the sun. The sun's going crazy. Everybody's, all these phony, lying people out of NASA and everything, say, gee, we don't understand what's going on with this, and we don't know why that's happening. They're lying. They know where it is. They know what it is. By the way, the Vatican knows what it is and is completely involved with keeping it as quiet as they can, along with our corrupted governments, because, and I'll give you, this is a wonderful little story that, again, I didn't know until I got into this. A couple of years ago, the Vatican built a huge infrared telescope, all right, and they run it, oversee it. It's being run, and of course, scientifically overseen by astronomers of the highest level. But it's located in Arizona.
Is this the one they named? It's called Lucifer or something?
Yes, sir. They named it Lucifer, and it directly relates to, as the same as Lucifer does, it directly relates to Nibiru, the planet coming back in that's going to cause so much grief. And you see, Nibiru does not have its own light at all, so it's a reflective body. You couldn't see it if it was in outer space with nothing between you and it, and you looked out at night, you would not see it until it reaches a point where it's going to pick up enough light, like the reflection of the sun, and then you will start seeing it twinkling as a star coming back to cause all of its grief.
I hear that you'll only be able to see it with the naked eye with 2 weeks before it passes, and the few days it's actually passing, that's when it's going to be taking up like nearly the whole sky.
Well, yeah, the deal with it in terms of its size, again, being 5 times the size of the Earth, and it's believed that it will come up and will cause a solar eclipse again, like I said, for a period of time, and because it will be between us and the sun for a period of time. Then, people don't realize it's so difficult to get a handle on this. As people say, why can't we see it? And if it's this big, et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
Right.
The planets are on what's a fairly flat plane in the solar system. It's called the plane of the ecliptic. And if you put your right arm out, straight out from your shoulder, you say, okay, that's parallel to the ground. And that is the plane of the ecliptic, where all the planets, give or take a few 100 million miles, so to speak, they're all pretty straight, flat on that, and going around doing their orbital thing, okay, and going around the sun. And then also the Earth is revolving on its axis all the time. So you get double movement of the Earth, and you have the sun, which is unbelievably gigantic, to try and do a picture or a photo or something of that sort that would show it in some kind of a realistic comparative size. You can't do that. The distances are too far. The sun is too large in diameter, just gigantic in its diameter. Now, here's what's happening. You put your arm out, and you're representing out to the right of representing the flat plane of the ecliptic. If you go down about 12 or 8 inches, that would be approximately 30 degrees down, or 30-degree angle off of the ecliptic flat plane. It is said, and this is where you have 2 different groups in conflict. Some of the astronomers are feeling that this is going to be coming up on that kind of a 30-degree off of the flat plane that our planets are on. In that case, you have no idea when you're first going to see this thing. See, because it's not coming in like you could just say, oh, well, look, it would be to the right of Jupiter up there, or Saturn. You look up there, it's just going to be to the right. No, it may not be at all. And my understanding is that as we speak today, that it's completely on the opposite side of the sun, so you wouldn't see it no matter what. So the idea of somebody saying, well, tell me where it is and I'll find it because I'm really good with my telescope. No, that's not going to happen. And people just can't get a handle on that. Like you said, it will probably be seen in the sky like a star in December, and then coming back, like I say, coming in, it will be getting bigger and bigger now, and then March and April. And the reason that I'm saying that is all of the studies going back when all of these previous sightings of this event was always in the March and April period of time. So what everybody is saying, and most everybody that's been studying it agrees, that it probably will be, again, March and April, so that if it doesn't appear this next December in the sky, which is considered to be most likely, the second most likely date would be another full year on the calendar of the next year, but it will be, again, visual in December, seriously passing close in March and April, because those are the dates and the period of time that it always previously had passed. So therefore, that's why we're not talking about August, we're not talking about next week, but they potentially are talking about next Christmas, the visual as a star, and then March and April, the problems. Now, I believe, yes, sir.
Sorry to cut you. I have a bunch of questions here. I mean,
so go ahead and ask, and let me see if I can answer them.
Yeah, I mean, because when this does come around, I would think what is the government going to do? I mean, obviously, are they going to try to bring about martial law to distract us? Are they going to shut down the internet and the electricity? Or, I mean,
they're going to wait for martial law, and then
no. And as a matter of fact, let me give you exactly what I am sure will happen. Okay, and I'm just positive of this, and I would bet money, but you wouldn't be around for me to collect.
Right.
Okay. Here's what's going to happen. And I hope I'm wrong too. You know, you have me back in a year, and you can say, "Boy, are you the jerk of the month?" I don't know. No. You're the biggest fool we've ever had on. Okay, and that's fine. I'll be glad to come back. But then I'd probably just be telling you, hold your breath because next year is coming.
Right.
All right. Anyhow, the bottom line is with this thing, they can never, ever announce that this even exists. The government cannot announce officially that this thing even exists out in Never Never Land. Although, a lot of people missed it, but it was only I'm going to say 60 days ago, that one of the big universities said they had absolutely identified 2 giant planets out past Pluto.
Oh, no, we heard this.
Yeah. Okay. Now, let me get back to where I'm at. Here's the government. They cannot at all tell it at any time that this is coming. The moment you ever did that, there would be uncontrollable panic on the globe. And we're not just talking in New York City or Omaha. We're talking. Where are you guys located? You're on the East Coast.
Northeast PA and the Poconos, yeah.
Yeah, are you up there? You're in Poconos. Okay. I used to live in Asbury Park. All right. So,
okay. That's where my mom grew up in, Asbury Park.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's a dead city at this point in time. It just got pulverized again, so they'll never rebuild it, I don't think. Anyhow, okay, where were we? So we get the government situation, right? They absolutely cannot tell the world at any time that, yep, there it is. Now, believe it or not, the Russians and the Chinese, they've had it on the regular news, but not to the extent of go down in a basement because it's heading back into town. But they have reported it, and on several times in Russian television, they've been right on their news, and they came out and said, the astronomers are watching this thing and they're not sure, and maybe this and maybe that. But that's interesting. We're not getting any of that or much of it. We do have a little of that too, as a matter of fact.
So why are they doing that? Are they doing it to cover their own ass?
Well, that's just what it is. Nobody yet has gone to what they've done so far is make fun of it, okay? Right. But the point is this. Here's what they're going to have to do. And mark my words, this is what's going to happen. Sometime 4 months to 6 months prior to the point in time when thousands of astronomers are going to say, we see a new star. What's going on? I have, after 3 years working, we've just finally released the DVD It's a double DVD package. It's actually 2 discs of 2 hours each. It's a 4-hour information disc, educational disc on what we're getting at right now. I have included in there live footage and photographs of the underground facilities, the drills, the locations, and everything I'm going to talk about tonight is completely documented in the visual DVDs that are available. So if you want to know what's going to happen, and I'm getting around to the point of what we are actually talking about here, when you want to know all of it and understand what's taking place, get this DVD. It'll completely set you back on your heels. So now let me get back to subject matter. We've got all these underground facilities and these giant drills. The Chinese one I was talking about, I want to finish that. The Chinese, they have a drill that is actually 3 drills across, face the front end. If you're facing them, they're like huge circular drills. The one on the left and the one on the right are big enough for an 18-wheeler to drive into the hole that one of them would make. They have one drill that is one of those huge drills on each side, and then in the middle is one larger drill that if you were inclined to do so, you could stack an 18-wheeler on top of another 18-wheeler and drive in through that thing. So you have 3 across the face of the drills that they've been using in China. I do have photographs of inside the Chinese tunnels. I have the information and pictures on the ones in Russia, and we have, of course, the complete, actually live footage of inside the tunnels and the underground hideouts in the United States. Some of these are created where they are primarily going to grow greens and foodstuffs underground, complete setup, greenhouse configurations underground to be able to continue fresh vegetables and animals and fish underground in these specialized growing facilities. And again, they're all interconnected by highways big enough to have drag races on them. And they're mind-boggling. I do have a couple of these photos that I'm talking about are on my website. You actually can go look up the website and then look where it says photographs and a photo gallery, I think is what it says. And we have several photographs, wonderful pictures of down inside these facilities that have been totally filled with freeze-dried survival foods. Now, when I was investigating this, I was still in a quandary. What in the world on earth would it be to cause these people, number one, to stop stealing as much as they were for their own pockets and start putting all this money into these rat holes underground, these survival facilities, which includes, by the way, one that recently had been completed under the Capitol building that will hold 3,000 people. And they've expanded underground facilities at the White House. In other words, entire facilities for living that weren't there before that are now under the White House. Not that the president's ever going to be there, because more than likely he's going to be long gone before this stuff hits the fan in one of the bigger, better facilities. They had taken the NORAD facility, which is the one that's inside the Granite Mountain for 40 years. It's been there, that was always there and doing all the NORAD warning facilities for the possibility of an invasion, a nuclear invasion, from either Russia or China, and they're worried about it for so many years about that, and they had built this huge underground NORAD facility. And by the way, some of these are like 20 stories down. 20 stories down into the ground. We're not talking about a one level. It's like really hard to comprehend. But the NORAD facility, a little while, was taken apart. They took all the high-level electronic tracking devices and equipment and moved it into another air base several miles away. I think it's called the Peterson Air Base, just off the top of my head. All of this, again, is in the DVDs that I'm talking about. Everything we're talking about is covered in the DVD. By the way, it's called Nibiru. The Incoming of Nibiru is what the title of the DVD is. Because what I finally...
that on your website.
Yes. Excuse me?
I was seeing that on your website. Order the new incoming Nibiru DVD from the store.
Right, and that's the one that literally is 4 hours. It's rather tedious, and believe it or not, we had cut it down like an hour and a half, and I hated to do it. I had to take so much out, but the bottom line is everything will be explained very thoroughly and completely in this DVD. We try to answer every possible question that would come up. Now, let me get back on track. Here's where, so I'm sitting here and I'm saying, well, what would it be that would scare the leaders of all these nations so badly that they actually would be